Hello, BookTube. This is my July wrap up, um, and it's my first wrap up. This channel started about a month ago, so this will be the first time I've done this, so I'm looking forward to it. July, for someone in my profession, is a very busy month. It's also hectic because it's when most of the people you rely on are running off on vacations, enjoy the summer and all that. We had a couple scenes at a public event where we did first scene of Macbeth. We did the first scene of Taming the Shrew. I had to do a presentation about an upcoming art program. We've had the summer reading program for children. Vermont reads with events for adults. So it's been a fun summer. A little wet, a little rainy, not a lot of sunshine this month. Hopefully August will be better. So let me get right to the books. So I'm not going to do them in any order here. This is Anna Quindlen. Imagine London, a tour of the world's greatest fictional city. It's a National Geographic's directions book, and from Washington, D.C., and it was published in, where's it at here? I always do this because my eyes are so bad. 2004. I picked this book up because I've picked up other books in the series, and really enjoyed them. They take a famous author, give him a geographical location. These books tend to be fairly short. Some of the ones I've liked in the past, Jan Morris, A Writer's House in Wales, is my favorite so far. William Kittredge, Southwestern Homelands, and I spent a long time in the Southwest. I really didn't enjoy that much. David Mamet, South of the Northeast Kingdom, which takes place here in Vermont, I enjoyed. Let's see, there was W.S. Merwin, The Maze of Ventadorn, about the troubadours and all that. I really enjoyed that one, and this one I enjoyed. Long before she became a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and best-selling novelist, Anna Quindlen was a voracious reader, and again, in book after book, she found herself somewhere in London, in a Dickensian alleyway with Oliver Twist, in a sparse bedsit with one of Barbara Pym's spinsters, or out and about with the bright young things of Evelyn Waugh. Just as all roads lead to Rome, all English literature leads to London, it seems, and soon she was thoroughly under the spell of the ancient, sprawling city by the Thames. This delightful book is a tale of three cities: the fictional London that lives in the pages of writers from Shakespeare to P.D. James and Martin Amis, the historical metropolis where so many immortal authors have made their homes, and the vibrant capital that today welcomes visitors from all over the world. I thought she did a really nice job with this, and I like this series. But they are all very individual, which is good. But it also means you don't know what you're getting until you sit down and read it. I thought she was very honest. She showed, London's a massive, massive city, so it has its dark side, but that's part of the literary history. It has its beauty, it has pageantry. So I really, really would recommend this book. It's like I say, it's a very good read. And she's a very engaging personality on the page. So that was Anna Quindlen, Imagine London, a tour of the world's greatest fictional city. A lot of times I end up reading books, not because I put them on a TBR. If I do a TBR, I probably pick 4 books for a month, 1 for a week. I'm never going to only read that amount, even on a slow month like July is for me. Because I always have to play a little bit of catch-up because of my patrons. They'll be interested in something and I'll need to catch up on it. I love poetry. I tend to like older poetry. Not because I dislike modern poetry, just I haven't had time, spend a lot of time on it. So I kept running into this one author, and I'd get these funny looks because I'd never read his stuff. And his name is Billy Collins. And the first one I picked up was this one to read. Aimless Love, New and Selected Poems by Billy Collins. 2013, Random House Publishing. Now this book, the selected are from some of his previous volumes. From Nine Horses of 2002, From the Trouble with Poetry 2005, From Ballistics 2008, From Horoscopes for the Dead 2011, and then New Poems. He was a 2-term poet laureate of the United States, so how I never read him, I don't know. Here's a picture of the author. He's the author of 10 collections at this point, including Horoscopes. Well, I already read through most of them. A distinguished professor of English at Lehman College, City University of New York, senior distinguished fellow at the Winter Park Institute of Rollins College. I liked them. I liked the vast majority. I thought he had a really interesting sense of humor, a way of painting a scene. And I'd finish the poem and walk away, and then all of a sudden, oh, wow. Because I find myself thinking about him. He seemed like a very likable human being, which was fun, and not full of himself. So I'm glad I read him. I'm surprised I've waited so long for somebody as distinguished as he is. And some of this reading was prompted by his new collection, The Rain in Portugal. And it was requested by one of my patrons, and I think they were a little surprised I hadn't already ordered it. But we ordered it, and I picked it up, and my wife's Portuguese, so it was a good thing to have. So this is his 12th collection of poetry. It's, let's get you the information here. Random House, New York again. The Rain in Portugal, Poems by Billy Collins, 2016. So it was last year. Former U.S. Poet Laureate Billy Collins comes a 12th collection of poetry offering nearly 50 new poems that showcase the generosity, wit, and imaginative play that prompted the Wall Street Journal to call him America's favorite poet. The Rain in Portugal, a title that admits he's not so much of a rhymer, sheds Collins' ironic light on such subjects as travel and art, cats and dogs, loneliness and love, beauty and death. His tones range from whimsical, elegiac, and he has a reaction to the death of Seamus Heaney, another one of my favorite poets. So I'm late to this party, but Billy Collins, I really enjoyed his poetry. And then it's inspired a little bit by some of my booktube watching. Paperback Junkie was talking a bit about Nick Carter, and it had been years, since my military days, since I'd read any Nick Carter, his Killmaster spy stories. And I ran into an old awards booked paperback, price 95 cents. Imagine that. Codename Werewolf. And it's classic Nick Carter. I had forgotten how much fun these were. So, let's see here. The torn scrap of paper was found in the debris of a plane crash near Spain. When the macabre message was finally deciphered, it turned up a shocker. Somebody was going to kill Franco, the powerful ruler of Spain. A professional assassin, codenamed Werewolf, had the job. That's why Spanish intelligence called in Nick Carter. Nick's assignment: put himself in the assassin's place. Think, plot, move with cunning brutality of a professional killer. A killer stalking an impossible prey. Do what the werewolf would do to slay Franco, but stay one step ahead of him all the time. It had good pace. It really did. Oh, I like the advertisement in it. Those always still throw me. I enjoyed it very much. So, beach read, quick evening read. This next one, John Lescroart, The Hunter, started out, I couldn't get into it. I just couldn't get into it. And I really remember mentioning in the video how disappointed I was because I love thrillers. And he's got a large body of work and I'd never read him. I don't know how many pages I was in. I was in like 97, 95 pages. I figured, I'll finish it. But it really isn't panning out. Well, by the time I was done, I was glad I read it. And maybe I was a little unfair, or maybe I was just coming to it in the wrong frame of mind. I ended up enjoying it. Enough so that I would go read some of the others in the series. And some of his other books. So I would have to say I reassessed my take on it. I wouldn't rave about it. I wouldn't praise it to the skies, but it was a good solid story. And it's one of the Wyatt Hunter books. Raised by loving adoptive parents, San Francisco private investigator Wyatt Hunt never had an interest in finding his birth family until he gets a chilling text message. How did your mother die? And this is a Signet Select book. Let's see, copyright is 2012. I think how it plays out, played out well, so I won't give any spoilers on this, but there's the author. So I amend my previous judgment. So, and then I've been seeing quite a bit of Agatha Christie on BookTube, so this is another BookTube inspired choice. And I just grabbed one I had on the shelf. And it was Cards on the Table, Agatha Christie, a Hercule Poirot mystery. There's a series of, you see his little sun bleached there. Let me give you that's Book of the Month Club, New York. Copyright 1936 by Agatha Christie. This edition was especially created in 1990 for the Book of the Month Club by arrangement with G.P. Putnam's son. This edition, copyright 1990 by Book of the Month Club. This was really, it's a Hercule Poirot. This was fun. And I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed Agatha Christie. And when I think of her, the same thing always comes to mind. I was in Moldavia in the early 90s on an archaeological dig or laboratory thing. And this guy, a Russian guy, was reading this sort of cool looking book. Of course, it's in acrylic. And finally realized it was Agatha Christie. So she has a far reach, just like I guess Dostoevsky does here, right? Mr. Shaitana loved to give macabre parties, so it was no surprise that he brought together 4 people, each of whom he believed had previously committed a successful murder, for bridge. Little did he know it would be the last party he ever gave. At least he had the foresight to seat at another table in a different room a collection of expert sleuths, including the indomitable Hercule Poirot. When Mr. Shaitana is discovered in the same room as the murderers with a steel dagger through his heart, Poirot and his fellow detectives can only wonder, did the dummy do it? Agatha Christie wrote about Cards on the Table that each of the 4 suspects, widely divergent in type, would employ a different method. The deduction that must, therefore, be entirely psychological, and the essential clue to the murder, the mind of the murderer. She also describes one of Poirot's favorite cases. It is most definitely among his most entertaining and challenging. And I would agree. There's parts where he's using this scorecard. I can't play bridge. I mean, I remember seeing as a child a complete guide to bridge, and it was like that. And I'm not a card guy anyway, so I've always been scared off. And even not understanding the game, I'm sure I would have probably enjoyed it even more if I understood the game. But even then, it was fun. There's pros going around with the scorecards and trying to figure out they're trying to figure out the psychology. I thought all the sleuths, they weren't like, there was a little bit of competition, but they weren't rude to each other, or they weren't, in a mad race to make the other one look foolish or themselves look good. Very civilized, if a murder can be. But this was a fun read, and I'm glad I read it. This next pile is some nonfiction. I actually should grab this one here first because it also was brought to my attention by a booktuber, Ernest Lee Eston. And after hearing him talk about it, I had to run out and get it. And I'm glad I did. It's Christopher B. Krebs, A Most Dangerous Book, Cactuses Germania from the Roman Empire to the Third Reich. It's W. Norton and Company, New York. And it's 2011. Nice little volume. And it tracks the life, the uses and misuses of this small piece of writing by Tacitus, his Germania, where he's describing what a couple thousand years ago were what the Romans called Germans, and how that was twisted, misused, embellished, in the end for nefarious purposes. First, to give people living in those areas a genealogy that's problematic to start with. And the author, in a scholarly way, but a very engaging way, does a masterful job with it. It's a book I'm really pleased to have read, and I'd probably I probably put it in the top of this month's reads. I don't do stars and all that because I'd always try to be too nice or something and give everybody 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever you do. So I just say whether I like it or not, and I very much enjoyed it. Then here's a different type of book. A Godless Jew, Freud, Atheism, and the Making of Psychoanalysis by Peter Gay. This was Yale University Press, New Haven in London, in association with the Hebrew Union College Press in Cincinnati. 1987. It was the Gustav A. and Mamie W. Ephraimson Memorial Lectures delivered at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion in Cincinnati, Ohio, during December 1986. And I'm a big fan of Peter Gay. So the copyright date on this is 87, the following year. Some of his thing I have his, which wasn't out at the time this was written. I have his biography of Freud. I think I have a collection of letters that he put together of Freud's. I read The Bourgeois Experience, which was 2 volumes. Victoria to Freud, Volume 1 was The Education of Senses. Let's see, where else he is here. Enlightenment and Interpretation, Volume 2, The Science of Freedom. Bourgeois Experience was followed up, Volume 2, The Tender Passion in 86. This was a surprisingly engaging book. I mean, you could see where it would, I mean, it could get away from the author, become too enmeshed in psychoanalysis. I have so-so history with reading books of psychiatry or psychology or that sort of thing. Sometimes I really enjoy them. Sometimes I don't, because I've always got a eyebrow raise. I read a biography, autobiography mixed thing about Jung recently, and just halfway through, I'm sitting here thinking, well, I'm not quite so sure. And when I get like that, if it gets too much, I'm not enjoying it. But this I enjoyed. I thought he did a good job keeping it focused. So here's a quote to give you an idea of how this book works. And don't forget, it's based on lectures. Why did none of the devout create psychoanalysis? Why did it have to wait for a completely godless Jew? Freud once asked. In this book, the eminent historian and Freud scholar Peter Gay enters the long-running controversy about the relationship between religion and psychoanalysis. Gay takes seriously Freud's claim that he was an atheist and argues that atheism was an essential stance for the making of psychoanalysis. He contends, in fact, that Judaism was not essential and that psychoanalysis is not a Jewish science, as both anti-Semites and ardent Freudians have often assumed. So you got both sides saying the same thing. Peter Gay begins by discussing why psychoanalysis could only have been conceived by an atheist. According to him, Freud saw science and religion as absolutely at odds with each other. While some theologians and analysts have attempted to forge an alliance between psychoanalytic and religious positions, these attempts at accommodation have failed and must fail. Psychoanalysis is not a religion, and the two comprise wholly incompatible styles of thinking about the world. Then Gay goes on to deal with the question of whether Freud's Jewish background contributed to the creation of psychoanalysis and describes Freud's secular Judaism. While Freud was very much aware of Jewishness and was in fact proud of it, this had nothing to do with the making of psychoanalysis itself. True, Freud himself saw a possible link between his Jewishness and his daring. As a Jew, he was treated as an outsider and therefore, he thought, could approach delicate topics such as sexuality more boldly than he would have been had he been thoroughly lodged inside. However, Gay maintains this is at best a weak statement. So, it's not a book you run into all the time. I don't know how easy it would be to find. But I really, really recommend it. It's very, very focused set of arguments and very clearly defined what he's looking at. And the last book, this one's been on my shelf a while and I haven't gotten to, is The Last Apocalypse, Europe at the Year 1000 AD by James Reston Jr. This is for the Doubleday, New York. The publication year is 1998, which timely because he's doing the year 1000 in the supposed apocalypse. And the year 2000, we saw a little bit of that, the Y2K and all that fun stuff. Beautiful cover, by the way, if you can look at it. So he describes Europe at this time. So he starts with the Vikings. There's Thor's hammer, Viking ships, runestone. I don't know if you can see some of this. He's got some more here. It was a slow start again. Non-fiction is usually my thing, so slow starts don't bother me. I'm a bit of a slow starter myself. But you really eventually became engaged with characters, many of whom I've read about before, maybe not quite from this perspective. And I thought he did a fine job bringing those characters to life. there's this fellow Gerbert of Aureliac who had studied with the Arabs in Spain and learned some science and was a very learned fella and sort of had that, do I get involved in politics or do I live a life of the mind? Otto the First, Second, and Third, each a tragedy in their own way. The move in the northern lands, a good piece on Stephen the First of Hungary and the conversion of the Hungarians, who were very capable militarily, and then the story of Cordoba in Spain, the anti-intellectualism at Cluny, which was the monasteries that had huge impact in Europe. So this I would, for a popularization of a historical epic, and when it came out, of course, it was timed to come out with the turn of the millennia. But and I'm 17 years late on the thing. But like I said, a slow starter. But wonderful book, fun read. So that was, let's see, I don't usually count, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 volumes for the books read this month. Obviously, a lot of reviews read, and articles read, which is where I spent a good part of my time. And so a good month for a July. I'll put together a list of TBRs. Like I said, I usually only pick one book a week, and that way I have the flexibility on my TBR to fill in those volumes I need for work. You know, like Billy Collins, somebody I don't know about, or somebody I hear about on BookTube, or a patron comes in and wants to know about. So that was the July wrap up. This channel's first wrap up, and thank you, BookTube.